Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
Okay. Well, welcome. Tonight we get to talk about suffering. How cool is that? Like lots of it too. There's like various lists of it. Book outlines 8 forms of suffering, and Nagarjuna offers another 6, and then we got the fundamental 3. It's like, wow. Who doesn't want to talk about suffering? The transition now in these Lam Rim teachings is moving from this first level of motivation, which is the idea of living a pretty good life, making sure that in your next life you have a good rebirth. And then this intermediate next level is a motivation that says, I want to be free of suffering. I don't want to be stuck in samsara. I want liberation. I want to achieve nirvana. And as I always point out, that we might have the motivation just to have a good human life. It might be more accurate where we are at. That's also comes into play. But in terms of the types of meditations and the focus of them, this one is that shift that moves us towards thinking, well, I'd like to be free of this. But in order to be free of it, what are we going to be free of? And that's where these types of suffering come in. And so I really find it meaningful to spend some time on types of suffering we don't generally think about. Matter of fact, we often don't think about something that seems pretty obvious, like aging, until we're kind of old, and then those things don't fix so well. So we'll get into it, but I guess the balance here is to recognizing, just the nature of samsara, which is filled with suffering and dissatisfaction and discomfort and dis-ease, without wallowing in it. Like, it's actually liberating to not fall into the traps of suffering. So even in samsara, by understanding the very nature of samsara, you're actually going to have some liberation from a lot of suffering that you wouldn't otherwise, be free of, because we're kind of delusional thinking that some of our happiness, well, actually it's probably really suffering or propelling some. So it's a little tricky business, as they say in the trade, tricky business. And so I don't want to spend 3 weeks on suffering to go through all of these. Not that didn't sound thoroughly enticing. But I think if we can spend a little time on really grasping what to look for and notice some of the nuance, then that's something we can look at this week. And so, having said that, I'm going to pop open the text and get us going here. So, in this section, they begin with 8 types of suffering. First 4, you'll notice I'm already queued up to 5. First 4, I don't think need a lot of explanation. It's birth, it's aging, it's illness, and it's death. Birth, aging, illness, death. So one thing about birth is interesting to remember, is that the cause of our death is birth. A lot of people, they died of a heart attack. Well, sort of. That's true. They died of that. Was that the cause? Yeah. And so really taking a little time to see this cycle, birth, aging, illness, death. I'm already talking about other stuff than what I'm going to show you. So I think we can really start to recognize that there's no human being you'll meet and no animal that you know of that's not going to have these sufferings. Aging, illness, sickness, death, birth, right? We rarely think about such things. As a matter of fact, it's funny, some people get pretty excited about birthdays, especially like 16 or 21. Or, some people do not get very excited about birthdays and stay 39 forever. It's just, kind of just stop there. And some people kind of brag about their age. Yeah, I'm 80, doing pretty good. Other people like, yeah, man, really? And so we have this really fascinating relationship with aging. I generally think getting old is really beats the alternative. Excited about that. So, when I turn 40, I'll see if I still have that thought. But, this journey of aging, we'll notice that as people, do get older, maybe 42 and in those upper years, then, they start getting a little nervous about aging. They start getting nervous about the inevitable, and death. And so aging has lots of problems. We get chronic pains. We have illnesses, that plague us. Death, people aren't generally looking forward to that. So I think we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on understanding that in this conditioned existence, you will have these birth, aging, illness, death. And it's the nature, right? It's just the nature. Nothing to complain about, It's the way it is. I wanted to say something else about death. Death's interesting to me, lots of ways. But one thing that really grabs my attention around it, if you are, just kind of a human being, don't have any particular religious belief, and when you die, that's it, no big deal. It's okay, I'm gonna live my life, I'm gonna die. Death can often be scary because I'm giving up everything I love. Other people have said, hey, I lived it, you only live once and did it well, time comes and I'm not very functional, it's okay to go. People have varying thoughts around that. But I've found something in my own mind interesting. If you're a religious person of sorts, let's say you believe in heaven and hell, Christian maybe. I was raised Catholic. Like, you're looking forward to heaven. Like, death's a pretty cool thing. It's like, woo, I get to go hang out with St. Peter. We get, all this cool stuff. I don't need to suffer anymore. That's pretty awesome. And then, so the quote that has always stuck my mind is, everyone wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to go today. So there's kind of an interesting question around your faith at that point, right? If someone really had deep faith and, they lived a good life and heaven's next, what would you possibly fear? Death's just a welcome thing. You wouldn't run into it or anything, but you'd be like, yeah, it's no big, don't worry, be hanging out, with my parents and stuff. Well, except that Jimmy guy, because he wasn't so good. But the other folks, they made it, get to hang out with. So it's cool, right? So there's a really interesting thing there is how many people of faith have faith. There's a lot of fear going on around that time, clinging, grasping. And then the same's with, Buddhist and Hindu and so forth, the types, and where we have a rebirth. And so, and I'll speak more about Buddhism because I know more about that. the idea then is, if I've lived a good ethical life, this is just a transition. Matter of fact, Thich Nhat Hanh has a good book, No Death, No Fear, right? Or No Fear, No Death. It's one or the other. Keith will correct me at some point. But it's one of those two, But that's the point, body, that's it, but, continues, right? And so that's a real interesting piece. And I think that for me, all three categories of whether a human being, this is it. I don't know if you ever saw there's a photo meme going around on the internet once, these three monks, with a joke book just laughing because they said, yeah, they said you only live once. They're just busting up. Like that's a good joke. So but you might be a person like that, and you can live a life where whenever you die, you're okay because you lived well. You knew it was coming. No big, it happens. We all die. Birth, aging, illness, death. Let's make the best we got. We get lemons, we make lemonade. Let's do this. When the time comes, what's there to worry about? I lived well. And so for that, one needs to, I can see we're never going to get through these lists. So we need to really fundamentally recognize death is certain, time of death uncertain. And what are you living for? And if we have that state of mind, doesn't matter. It's, I have this body, this life for a limited time. Could be tomorrow I'm gone, could be another 20 years, whatever. And so I'm going to really soak in the life that I do have, no matter what may, right? So adversity or felicity, it's all going to do it. I might be someone then who's also thinking about next life, and in which case, live a good life, got nothing to worry about, hang out in heaven, or have a good transition and next rebirth. So we're in power of that as well. And so the key is, if I understand this very fundamental reality of these birth, aging, illness, death, that's the nature of things, then I'm not going to be surprised when I get ill. I'm not going to be surprised when I get aging, and I'm going to engage in life as best I can, so when death comes, there's really nothing to fear. It's just, it's part of the deal. So, if we can just be in that space, what the next layer just comes in, okay, well, what do you believe? So, if you are just a hedonistic person, you're just going to chase pleasure as much as you can and live a good life until you die, well, you might find out that that's not going to work well. Because if you're chasing hedonistic pleasure, you're not really necessarily going to cultivate the well-being, self-worth, purpose, meaning that all research shows really is meaningful. So we can fall into traps in that sense, but good, ethical, wholesome, meaningful life. So the same principles for happiness in this lifetime, doesn't matter your religion, belief system, will translate to each of these types of spiritual belief systems. But as you tune in to that belief system that really fits for you, then it brings another level of potential. And we get to sort of participate in this life from a different perspective. So Keith did put up no death, no fear. There you go. Thanks. So now we move into this next step, which is to really start seeing the shortcomings of this conditioned existence. So these ways that we suffer in a conditioned existence. And again, these are going to be true whether we believe in the next life or not. Now, there's going to be some reference, in some of these things about that potential for rebirth potential as well. So everybody with me so far? We're going to really embrace the opportunity to recognize the shortcoming of the experience of life that we get to live, which will enhance the quality of the life that we get to live. Right? And Scott Peck says, if you understand life's difficult, it's really not that difficult. My problem is I think it shouldn't be. But when you know it is, then it's not very difficult. You get to live much easier. You don't get thrown off your boat. The little bumps, or waves, I guess. If it's a boat, it'd be waves, not bumps. That'd be like if you're on like a skateboard or something. Which immediately brought me back to old school skateboards with clay wheels and pebbles. I don't know if you remember that. Whew, man, not fun. Okay. We ready to talk about suffering? We're in the right mental state. I might be suffering now that I keep going on. Yeah. All right, let's pop it up. So the first four, and now let's take a look at the second four of the first 8. Love list. So this starts with these 8 forms of suffering. So in this experience that we get to have, this human experience we're in, one of the ways that we're going to suffer is that we're going to have to separate from what is pleasant. Okay, so it's not going to be very good for hedonists. This can include people or belongings you love and cherish, as well as your home, abilities, status, and so forth. The separation could be temporary when you or the other person are studying or working overseas, for instance. Laura's leaving me for a little while. Yeah, she just did that, by the way. I mean, it's...
You're leaving me.
So, or it could be permanent, such as when a loved one dies or you lose a job. That may not be permanent. They might hire you back. I got rehired 3 times. Same job. Got fired twice. I think I quit the 3rd time. Made it successful. So, separation coming from, trips, job changes, things like that. Someone dies, you lose a job. Okay, this is a job I really liked. Well, they bring to mind examples of this form in your own life, such as living far away from the people you love, or the death of someone that you were close to. Obviously pets and, all that as well. You just recognize how painful these experiences are and understand that as long as we are in samsara, we will encounter them again and again. So pretty much again and again, right, we all know that we have lost things. We've lost people, we've lost relationships, we've lost abilities. I mean, that's a key thing, right? Abilities. As we age, we're going to lose some abilities, sometimes cognitive abilities as well. And, a lot of people, living up here in the mountains, it's pretty, they're outward, active, and then they can't do some of the things they used to be passionate about. And a lot of struggle. So here we have loss, we have grief, we have, struggles there. But, day in and day out, we become parted from things, including the way it used to be. Yeah. Joke I heard the other day, Aspen, Colorado joke. We live near Aspen. How many Aspenites does it take to change a light bulb? And they said, well, 5. 1 to change the light bulb, and the other 4 to stand around and talk about how Aspen's not the way it used to be. It's not like the old days. And so you can see how we can suffer and struggle and, change. And so we'll be parted, and, I'll guarantee you will be parted from everything that you found pleasurable at some point. Even eventually this body will go. So therein lies an opportunity, though. If I recognize that I'm going to lose, I'll be separated from that which I love, there's two things that can happen. I can detach from it, like it's not that important. Now you're giving up the quality of your life. Or you can embrace it while you have it, like really treasure the moments of the life that we have, the relationships we have, the people in our life, the things we do. Truly appreciate it, knowing it's ephemeral, so I really want to enjoy it. And that's the better take, I would suggest. So the things we find pleasant will be parted from, and then we have to meet with the unpleasant. Okay, so we're going to have some difficult things happen a lot in our lives. So this can involve encountering people you don't like, or who are difficult to deal with, unwanted experiences such as accidents, injuries, flight delays. The whole Newark thing, that was kind of a deal. By the way, lines are very short today at Newark. Get through security pretty quick. I'm guessing people probably didn't want to fly through there. Caught on the news, not making that up. Or getting stuck in a long, boring meeting. Oh man, that's worse than the long flight delay. Having to do work you really don't want to do, and so on. Think of examples of this from your own experience and remind yourself that as long as we are in samsara, we do not have complete control over what happens to us and cannot always avoid unwanted events. And so when we bring this to mind, it's not just that we're meeting with unpleasant, right? We are confronted with the suffering of others that we love that go through things, and the people suffering in Gaza, people in the Ukraine, like the suffering's going around us. We hear about this. We meet with the unpleasant a lot in a lot of different ways, not just, whether it's a flight delay or these types of things. Those are, part of the deal of travel, but difficult, painful, emotional events. And these things happen. It's just very much a part of life. And so really understanding that there's no way to avoid it. We can't put ourselves in a little bubble. It's just going to happen. And again, if I know that life can bring me unpleasant, then it's not going to hurt as much when it shows up. The really tricky thing with our mind is when we do everything to protect ourselves and we think we're protected. And we're not, right? That job that had all that security, well, it's not there all of a sudden. Or I break my leg, or I got my cancer diagnosis, or, I worked out, I exercised, So we can really, in our lives, work really hard on, just making sure we don't have to meet the unpleasant and think we might not have to. I was just reflecting on, people who had good careers, who living out of an RV, out in the Bay Area and stuff. The person was going through interviewing people or living in cars and RVs and all that, just one of them got a long, cancer, disease, medical bills, lost a job, and once was a stable thing with all that, gone through, living out of an RV, and can't afford to rent a place and having a full-time job simultaneously. We can be in all these situations. And so if I recognize that what is wonderful, well, it's temporary, so enjoy it. And what is difficult, is going to come. Old saying, enjoy it while you got it, because it'll go away. And when it's terrible, don't worry, because it'll go away. right? It'll get good again, right? So really having that understanding, we get to work with that. And next one is going to be oops. What? 7. Where it's okay. Not getting what we want, which the Dalai Lama says can sometimes be a great stroke of luck. Yeah, that's one of my favorite Dalai Lama quotes. Not getting what you want can sometimes be a great stroke of luck. And boy, that has borne out in my life a lot. And so we're going to desire certain things. We're going to want a life in a particular way. And as we all know, it may not turn out so. And then the last one here in this list is the suffering of having contaminated aggregates. So this is more subtle. It's just the fundamental nature of our sort of human form conditioned existence. The aggregates refer to our body and mind, the components we are made of: form, feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. So those are the 5 aggregates that make us up as in our own form, right? So we have a human form, we have consciousness, right? We have these sensations, feelings. Not this isn't like emotional feeling, it's sensations. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And then these, then we kind of discriminate. I like that, don't like that. And then these compositional factors, and that's usually this collection of sort of karma and imprints and conditioning that just fill in everything. And so the Buddhist kind of description of this is, they're contaminated, and that means they're limited by our misperception, and so we're conditioned. And we all know that there's a lot of things we can't do even though we want to do, right? I'm going to be happy today. That lasts like 10 minutes. I'm going to start this new habit today. Well, that doesn't work out. We start noticing the habits and the conditioning, the limitations of this mind-body thing, and kind of imprisoned by that. So that's more subtle to become more aware of, except it's very obvious sometimes. You get depressed, right? Depression. You don't want to be depressed, but this mind-body thing is, you don't have a lot of choice, right? You can't just choose to have the attitude you like or engage in actions that you like. You're going to find lots of limitations around that. And the karma and klesha is really the driving force. We can change that. We can work on it, and that's what the path of liberation is purifying these 5 aggregates. Skandhas is the other name I was trying to think of. 5 skandhas, 5 aggregates. And so that's really the path of freedom, is to purify all 5. Then we're free of all this. And so you'll see number 5 a lot, like 5 Buddha families and so forth. 5 elements, all of which can be transformed, and then we're free. So we've got these conditions and ways that just through our existence, as long as we're in samsara, there's no way to avoid these. Just no way. It's just the way it is. And so if I meditate on that, if I start to recognize that no matter how hard I work in samsara, no matter what I do, no matter how much money I make, no matter how many people I help, no matter what types of relations I get, there's no way to escape these 8 conditions. It's limited. Can't do it. And it'll end in death. So you might start thinking, well, like the Buddha said, well, is this necessary? And he found it wasn't. That was his big quest. Do we need to suffer? And his ultimate answer is no. We suffer because we don't know who we are. We don't know how we exist. And out of this misperception, these 5 contaminated aggregates, we see ourselves as independent and separate from the world we're living in, and don't even see how we're arising dependently and what the real causes are. And so if we reflect on this, we'll start to call to mind that all this is leading to renunciation, basically. That I am not going to fall in the trap of hanging my faith on my money, my job, my relationships, none of these things are going to provide me with that lasting happiness. I think they just can't. And what is it that you can rely upon, right? So the idea then is moving towards this renunciation, renouncing the delusion that these things, people, and events will provide me a lasting happiness, right? We're still going to suffer. We're still going to have unpleasantness. People we love will die. Things are going to happen. It's just going to happen. And the more attached I am to that lifestyle that I think will bring me happiness, the more suffering I'm going to have, because I'm going to try to maintain it. I'm going to put all my hopes into it. I'm going to put all my, faith in that. And then I'm going to stress, about losing it, about it changing, and trying to grasp onto things. And so, we can look at just the mental health crisis here in the United States. And, we have this incredible wealth in terms of the rest of the country, the world. And we have much greater degree of mental health issues. People are less happy. So you're kind of looking at this from a Buddhist perspective. You're going, well, I'm not going to spend all my time decorating my prison cell. I'm going to spend time while I'm living in this opportunity to free myself from it. I'm going to move towards renunciation. I'm going to embrace the difficult situations in my life as opportunities to grow, to learn, to build character, to be of benefit to others. I'm going to enjoy the beautiful things in my life and appreciate them and all of the conditions that gave rise to them. And I'm going to use every ounce of this life to be healthy and well mentally, emotionally, physically, so that I can really focus on the skills of freedom. So, you're really soaking it in. So these opportunities are here, but I'm not going to fall into the trap of taking refuge in samsara. That's the difference, right? Taking refuge in my job, taking refuge in my career, taking refuge in my, the house I have, the things that I grab onto, the college degrees I have, or the awards on the wall. I'm going to take refuge. And here's something that, as an intermediate level, that I think crosses all motivations, all spiritual traditions. And I personally feel I can take refuge in. I mean, I do take refuge in Buddhism. What do you do when you, like for news? That word's not plumb. But bottom line is I'm a Buddhist, so I need to expose myself. So I actually have a lot of faith in the Buddhist path. I take refuge in. But maybe you don't. And, but what I can always rely upon is that I'm going to feel good about myself when I do things that I feel good about. Right? So there's a real intrinsic research that says your self-worth, your value, your well-being, is really coming from always doing activities that really align with your deepest values and your belief systems. So I think that that holds up. Doesn't matter what the belief system is. When I'm living in alignment with my deepest core values around ethics and wholesome activities, I guess it does matter, because if your belief system is hurting people, let's stick with the wholesome. Yeah. If you live a wholesome, ethical life, like that's something you can really rely upon. Okay, so those are the 8. Anybody can recount those? Yeah, right.
Birth, old age, sickness, death, being parted from what you want, getting what you don't want. Help me out here.
Not getting what you want.
Not getting what you want.
That was another one.
Yeah, Kevin said that. And then these contaminated.
Others.
Yeah. So the idea here is that we spend some time just really understanding this is the nature of samsara. And meditating on that, really getting a deep, fundamental realization of the limitations of this conditioned existence. And as I mentioned, it doesn't need to be a downer, it's actually a liberator, And so if you catch yourself, worrying that you're going to lose everybody in your life, well, yeah, actually you're right. But that's not really they're not the source of our happiness, right? They are a condition that gives rise to it. And so that's what we get to work with, is really embracing, when we do meet with the pleasurable, while we have it. And when adversity comes, it's temporary also. And the more that we're aware of it, the less attached we will become to those external circumstances, people, events, and so forth. That's where so much of the suffering comes from, is that attachment to it and the belief that if you line it all up, you're going to be happy. I'm trying to make this whole suffering thing seem really good. How we doing? Is it? I'm working with it? Come on. I'm kind of perky about it. So, but that's the big prison, is we forget the limitations of samsara. And we fall into the laziness of busyness. Busy doing all the worldly activities and not cultivating our inner qualities. And we forget. But if you spend time on it, then you start going, that's really not the most important thing in my life anymore. My inner qualities are. I think we still have time to get to the 3 sort of primary that are usually taught. I'm going to skip over the 6 by Nagarjuna. Here, let's see what their conclusion is. Understand that as long as we remain in samsara, we will encounter these 8 types of suffering again and again. Generate the wish to free yourself from the situation so that you can help others to also become free. And so that's the beautiful thing. If you have a faith in a Buddhist path and things beyond this, then basically, no, we don't need to be here. So stop getting involved in the conditions of putting yourself back here. You can be free. So I can either be moving towards freedom or continuing the cycle.
Can I ask you a question, John? It's Nicole.
Sure.
So generate the wish to free yourself from this situation so you can help. So this situation, is still in cyclic existence, though, right?
That is the situation, samsara.
Right, but if we free ourselves from the situation of cyclic existence, how do we help others?
Oh, you have much greater capacity, actually. We're very limited in what you can do right now in samsara as a sentient beings, right? I mean, you can donate some food, some time, you can help people alleviate a little bit of their suffering, physically, but you're not going to free them. But as an enlightened being, you'll have incredible amount of resources to help people, past, present, future simultaneously. You have omniscience, a much greater capacity to help others.
So, in this realm, like in this room, there could be somebody with those qualities. We just don't know. Is that
Sure, absolutely.
okay?
Let's hope so.
And is that person, like the Dalai Lama, can choose where he's reborn? That's what we're talking about, to become liberated?
There's levels, so you cannot be fully enlightened and have a conscious rebirth. You can be a pretty highly realized being that has trained in the methods to stay conscious during the death process and choose a rebirth, which doesn't necessarily make you a Buddha. I don't believe.
Okay.
Hang myself out there on that one, but I believe that to be true. But as a Buddha, you can manifest hundreds of thousands of yourself, limit things themselves. I mean, you can do so many things as a Buddha that creates conditions for people to not suffer, and conditions of that. Not just thinking of the Dalai Lama as one person in 14 forms, but much rather, let's say, the embodiment of Chenrezig Sig and one aspect of Chenrezig Sig that's manifested in Dalai Lama, and there's maybe millions other forms of manifestations of Chenrezig Sig that are showing up and might be the waiter at your local restaurant. And you wouldn't even know it. So, as like a fully enlightened Buddha, so many opportunities to do so many things that are beyond our real comprehension.
Thank you.
So, we keep wanting to think in our conventional mind of what this experience is, but this experience is just a limited experience, and we think this world's real in this very concrete way. And we may discover it's really not. I mean, samsara and nirvana is not a different place. It's a different mind. So maybe you're not even in samsara. Maybe everyone and everything you experience is nothing other than a condition of your mind. And they're all here to save you. Put that hat on for a minute, huh? Everybody is here to help you free yourself.
I guess when you think about it that way, that's true, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, that actual statement can be absolutely true.
The complete interconnectedness, interdependence of everyone and everything.
And that everyone you meet you're always seeing them through the limitations of your own mind, and however they show up, how you relate to them can help you free yourself.
Yeah. Kind of explodes in my mind at the moment. Thank you.
Well, don't worry, it'll be impermanent. So that is a really valuable practice. It's just understand this is all that opportunity. But we have a limited mind, so we see how all these people are suffering there, and how somebody meditating in a cave going to help that person. Like, you don't really get that this is all just this very conditioned experience we're having, and there's no independent, inherent thing out there. That is the way that we see it. We're just seeing it all wrong.
When I think about how people thought the world was flat and didn't understand gravity, then I am able to say, well, I just don't understand. And I really want to. But right now I just don't.
Trust me, there's still people who believe the world's flat. Yeah. All right. So let's take a look at the 3, and this is generally well, those 8 are pretty traditional as well. But these 3 is whenever you find a teaching on these types of suffering, we really get to spend some time with them. So let's pop that up. So, list of 3 sufferings is the most comprehensive way of gaining insight into the unsatisfactory nature of samsara. Isn't that great? Like, the fewer the number, the most comprehensive. Why did they just drag us through all those 8? What's going on? And the other 6? The Buddha mentioned them in the Dukkha Sutta. They are also explained in many other Buddhist scriptures. They include all the other types of suffering and are experienced throughout samsara. So basically, it's condensed and it's inclusive, right? It embodies them all. And the suffering of suffering. This is suffering that is obvious and easy to identify, such as horrific experiences that occurred due to war, natural disasters, violent crime, poverty, injustice, disease, and so forth. It also includes our normal everyday problems, physical discomforts such as aches and pains, heat and cold, hunger and thirst, as well as mental difficulties like loneliness, depression, grief, frustration, anxiety, confusion, and so on. Bring to mind examples of these from your own experience, past and present. Contemplate that as long as you remain in samsara, you will continue to encounter these again and again. Right? So I think we all know physical discomfort. We know heat, we know cold, we know thirst. We have loneliness, depression, grief, frustration. Like this is suffering. It's everybody can relate to this. I'll experience it. There's wars, there's violence, there's the normal, tangible forms of suffering that we can experience. Nobody's immune. Suffering of change, a little trickier. This is more subtle than the first. It refers to the experiences we usually consider to be pleasure or happiness. Because these experiences are transitory, they only last a short time and are not fully satisfying. They are considered another type of suffering or dukkha. Eating is a good example. I always bring up the eating. Most of us enjoy eating, but if it was truly pleasurable, the pleasure would increase the more we eat. Instead, we end up with a bloated belly and indigestion. Even if we eat just the right amount to satisfy our hunger a short time later, well, again, become hungry and we need to eat. For these reasons, eating is not fully satisfying, right? Let's see an old example I give. First piece of pie, pretty good. Second piece of pie, sort of third, it's starting to get painful. So eating, right, not so good. Another example is the posture of our body. I like this one. After being on our feet for a while, our legs start to ache, so we sit down. At first it feels good, but eventually sitting becomes uncomfortable. So we stand up and we enjoy stretching our legs. But soon our legs again start to ache, so we again sit down. This pattern continues all day, even while we're sitting, standing, or lying down. We don't remain still for long, but almost constantly shift our position to find a more comfortable one. Observe what you do with your body throughout the day, or even for an hour, to check if this is true. If any posture was truly pleasurable, it would remain so without changing. But however we place our body, it eventually becomes unpleasant or even painful. Another problem with pleasure is that we usually get attached to it. I'm just thinking of a few of my attachments at the moment. Okay, Mateo salsa, man, medium heat, whoa. Oh yeah, like 5 jars at home right now. I'm probably not attached, I'm just appreciating. If you haven't had it, just saying. Don't do it because you'll get attached and you'll suffer, So, we get attached to the objects that we find pleasant. We want them to remain forever and never change, but this is impossible. It is simply the nature of samsara that pleasure, people, and things change moment by moment, disintegrate, and eventually cease to exist. If we do not recognize or accept this reality, but want things to be otherwise, we are setting ourselves up for suffering and perpetuating attachment. I just went all blurry there. One of the factors binding us to samsara, so this attachment, not only wanting things to change, we try to bubble wrap our life. We want the things that bring us pleasure and then, don't. It's pretty interesting too how certain devices or things that we bought, over time aren't that interesting, because something else is newer and different and all that, And then other things that we don't ever want to change. It's a treasure, Never get tired of it, never want to lose it, So this does not mean that there's no pleasure or beauty in samsara. These do exist, but they are ephemeral, like rainbows. Here one moment, gone the next. Only in the state of nirvana beyond samsara is there genuine lasting happiness, satisfaction, and peace. Think of some pleasant experiences you have had. How long did the pleasure last before it vanished or turned into something else, even suffering? And so, the best day in your life, the best whatever in your life, it came and it went, right? And then we've suffered after that. And yet we keep trying to, grab that. So suffering of change, much more subtle. In other words, everything that we find pleasurable, can also become painful. Whether it's our body positions, whether it's food, whether it's vacation, whether it's a house, whatever it is. And then so the first two, very straightforward, but you can see how it encompasses the aging, sickness, death. You're going to meet with pleasurable and you're not going to get what you want. And we've already covered that right in these first two. And now we're going to come to the eighth one here, which is about this conditioned existence, these contaminated aggregates. The pervasive suffering of conditionality. This is even more subtle and difficult to recognize than the suffering of change. It refers to our very existence in samsara, under the control of karma and delusions. Although our mind's nature is clear and has the potential to experience the peace of liberation and enlightenment, this pure Buddha nature is obscured by delusions such as ignorance, anger, and attachment. These delusions, those are 3 root poisons that create samsara. These delusions, which arise uncontrollably in our minds, motivate us to create the karma that causes rebirth in samsara again and again, as well as its myriad miseries, right? So that ignorance, anger, and attachment and aversion, misunderstanding, attachment and aversion. different ways it gets presented, but it just drives the wheel, the misperception, this independent self separate from you. Like this, don't like that. So I'm going to do things to not have that and to get this. And now creating the attachments, I'm reinforcing the delusion. There's the people I don't like, the people I do like, the things I like, the things I don't like, what brings me joy, what doesn't bring me joy. I just reinforce that. Even views about myself, what I think is good, what isn't good, how I'm not as good as what I'd like to be, or how someone's better than me, or I'm better than someone else. There's a whole lot of I there, and a lot of reinforcement about how the world works, which is not how it works. That perpetuates this cycle, limits us, conditions us. And the thing is, nobody's doing it to us, except us. Yeah. To get a sense of this, consider how difficult it is to keep your mind free of negative thoughts and feelings for a day, an hour, or even a few minutes. And although you want only pleasant experiences, you're unable to have them 24/7. Without choice or control, unwanted problems occur. So, yeah, just be free of mental afflictions for how about half a day? All right. I mean, it's a good plan. I'm going to be optimistic today. Go with the flow. Might still have stress, anxiety, all these things are going to arise anyway. So that's that conditioned existence, this limitations here. This is the meaning of pervasive suffering. It's called pervasive because it pervades every realm of samsara, even the God realms. The gods or devas have extremely long lives with little or no suffering and fantastic enjoyments that are far better than ours. I'm not sure they had Mateo salsa. I don't know.
Maybe they have warehouses.
Well, maybe they have a lot of it. Yeah. But they're not free of karma and delusions. When their karma to live in those realms runs out, they die and are born somewhere else, often in the lower realms. Being in samsara is like being in a prison. Our karma and delusions are like the walls, bars, and guards that prevent us from escaping. The three types of suffering can be compared to the different experiences one has in prison. Terrible experiences such as being attacked by another prisoner are like the suffering of suffering. Pleasant experiences such as getting a visit from a loved one or having a nice Christmas dinner are like the suffering of change. And simply being confined in a prison, not free to leave, that undesirable situation is like pervasive suffering. That's a pretty cool analogy. Samsara is not an external place like planet Earth, with nirvana somewhere up in space. Samsara is our very mind-body complex that is under the control of karma and delusions. So it is right here with us all the time. However, it's not a permanent situation. We do have the ability to escape from it by freeing ourselves from the causes of samsara. And then in conclusion gives you some summaries to reflect upon. So that's the invitation this week, is to review these points around suffering of suffering, suffering of change, this pervasive suffering, the conditions, the limitations. And really, if think about, can I be free of some of these? And you may find that if you work on the pervasive, you might be the most effective way of freeing yourself from the others. So even when a suffering of suffering arises, you won't suffer as much, because you know that it's samsara, you know that it's struggle. And you won't suffer as much if you know about suffering of change. You'll just have one piece of pie. Right? And if it's not healthy for you to eat pie, you might not eat the pie, right? And you'll see your own value in living a life that's meaningful and purposeful. And so if I start working on the karma and the kleshas as primary, it will affect the other sufferings. You'll suffer less. Because they all arise from a mental, emotional state, from the misperception, thinking these things can offer us the happiness we're seeking when they can't. And that, these terrible things that I find unpleasant, it's because I think they should be different, and so I'm going to have a lot more resistance as opposed to engaging in reality, understanding that the difficult times offer me opportunities, that the pleasurable times should be appreciated because they're temporary and a result of this incredible coming together of events. And so the more accurately I live, the less mental, emotional suffering I'll have, even as I have suffering of suffering and suffering of change. I will not be as affected by them. I won't suffer as much. So back to the idea that if I understand and embrace suffering, I really won't suffer as much. So it's really good to reflect on suffering. And suffering is really not a good word for this. It's what's commonly used. It's what we relate to, but dissatisfaction is a good one, Some people try to use the word like just, stress. But dissatisfaction, because, even like the good stuff not going to last. Terrible stuff I don't like. The limitations not there. Sometimes it really does feel like suffering. But sitting in a jacuzzi doesn't feel like it. But you can be dissatisfied in a jacuzzi, right? You can sit there a little too long, or or not have it when you want it. So this is the practice at this point would be this week is to start to be aware of our misperceptions of suffering, right? How we, really engage in life thinking that, we're not going to suffer, that we can prevent suffering of change, think about how much time, energy to preserve something, right? And it's changing, Maybe it takes 5 people to change a light bulb in Aspen. I wonder about in your town. How many people? So we're going to talk about how, Carbondale is not the way it used to be. Yeah. Man, Pasadena where I grew up, not the way it used to be. It's probably a good thing. It's a little rougher in my town. Kind of a hip spot now. All right, well, any questions, thoughts, curiosities, interest, light bulb jokes? Ooh, Dan unmuted. I don't know. Is he?
Yeah, I know. What does that mean? Earlier we talked about detachment and engagement, and I felt like we kind of went in 2 different directions. Like you want to, or there's an impulse to withdraw so you don't, experience this ride, and then there's an impulse to engage, which is kind of, chasing all the pleasure. I don't know. Can you help me figure out what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So a lot of times people will because of like suffering or change, you're going to lose what's pleasant. They detach. They don't really give value to the people in their life. They don't give value to the job that they're doing. It's just stuff. It's, sort of a nihilistic way of living and emotionally detached. They don't care that much about things, right? They harden. And actually, the invitation is to do quite the opposite. It's to fully embrace, fully engage with, fully participate with the people in your life, the conditions of your life, and understanding the difference between like love and attachment, right? So attachment limits your ability to love. When you're attached, right, you really want that person or that thing or the event to be the way you want that to be, right? You're attached to how it makes you feel. When you love, you want the best for that person, you want the best for the situation, you just want the best. Loving is not got all the claw marks on it, And so when we recognize and love others and love the environment and love our situations and love our job and, love these events, we deeply appreciate them. So I often will use the word appreciate, because it has it's a little bit tangible. I deeply appreciate and care for this person, which means I want the best for them. I'm not attached to them doing certain things to make me feel good or be in my life or not be in my life. That limits love. And so, I always go back to, the quote, love never hurts, attachment does, right? And so if we can understand with equanimity this experience and what a gift it is to have someone in our life, or kids or grandkids, whatever that is, to emotionally be very available, connected, caring, without the belief that we need them to make me happy, but rather we get to enjoy this experience together, and what a gift it is. And, then we have love, then we have care. So rather than detach from something wouldn't last, we want to show up for it while we got it, without the attachment, and fully engage. Like the Garth Brooks song about that dance. The dance. It's called The Dance. Where he had this dance. Would he have had it if he knew how it would end? And he said, basically, yeah, I'm glad I had that dance, even though, it ended badly. Like it was worth it, But I think he was a little attached. Anybody surprised I know Garth Brooks songs?
A little bit.
Carla says no. Okay. Others are like, yeah, what? Yeah. Okay. So that's wherever our engagement is, human, want to have a good human life, don't know about the future, want to have a life where, just in case there's a next life, I want to do some pretty good stuff. Whether we really come to this stage in these teachings where we might actually would like to investigate that it's really my mind-body experience that's limiting me, and that's the real prison. Understanding the nature of how we suffer allows us to not suffer so much, and you can live a better human life, not getting attached, learning how to love, not trying to make things permanent that aren't permanent, understanding that life is messy for everyone, and there's no way to avoid aging, sickness, death, pleasurable and unpleasurable. Then we can actually view that everything that's happening in the life, we have it for a limited time, how do we use it in a way that's meaningful? And then we have this really grounded way of engaging in the life that we have, no matter what your ultimate motivation is. But if we don't think about suffering, we're just going to suffer a lot. Right? We're just going to keep trying to build up a world that, is inevitably going to throw curveballs at us from time to time. So that's the invitation to. And you know what you'll usually find, by the way, is just how much compassion there is in the world. You'll start seeing how much goodness there is. You're going to start seeing how much resiliency there is in the world. Amongst all of this nonsense, you're going to see people who show up anyway, who are resilient, who are, don't give up, who help others, who volunteer. Like, you're just going to see the incredible nature of humanity when you start recognizing the pervasiveness of the struggle. And for me, I find that incredibly inspiring and quite wonderful. All right, let's go ahead and dedicate the merit that we've all cultivated this Wednesday evening. A lot of things we could have been doing. We're here cultivating compassion, care, suffering, joy, understanding, and we can dedicate this all for the benefit of all sentient beings and those who care too. Just taking a moment to really know that every little bit of love or care that we bring into the world, there's a little bit more in the world. And that our virtue, our kindness, our care has an impact. And let us dedicate all of this for the benefit of others and for our own continued spiritual growth. Let's dedicate. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right, well, thank you all so much. Such a joy to have you all here. We went on a bit long, so appreciate you all hanging out and all the good you bring to the world.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
John.
everybody.
Have a
Thank
good night,
you.
everybody.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, John. It's good to see everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Jesse.
Ah,
Hi, Jesse.
You a kitty or a doggy earlier?
cat.
Thought so. Definitely had that cat vibe going on. I hear it now.
You're a good cat, Jesse. Bye.
Bye. Jesse the cat. Bye.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha.